how do you learn how to use your time most appropriately? And I think that the answer is trial and error, that basically nobody makes perfect use of all of their time, but you learn as you go. And you think of it as a system where every day you're granted a new block of time and you want to make the most use of that time. And you learn from what's happened in the past. You learn from, well, if I invest time in this person, does it help the person? Does it help the whole ecosystem? Does it help other people? Does it help me? And by doing it over and over again, you can really start to get a good intuition for which favors are worth doing, which people are worth spending extra time investing in. And it's an ever-learning cycle. So even now, after doing it for more than a decade, I'm still learning every day. So I think the key is to commit to knowing that you're not going to spend all your time perfectly, but that you're going to keep learning. It's a balance. In a startup, the number one rule is to survive. So anything that's not going to enable your survival is clearly not a good thing. But we outlast our startups. And so we can't do anything that will benefit us in the short run, but actually hurts us outside the context of a startup. And so every founder, every entrepreneur has to play this balancing game where you do what it takes to survive, but not if it's going to be bad for you in the long run. And there's no rule book. You actually have to figure it out as you go. This is why it's challenging. It's also why it's invigorating. Well, you have more time than you think. You think you don't have any time, that you have to get right in there and do everything right away. And that's not necessarily true. Your professional career is a progression. Every relationship you have with a person is a progression. And it's much more important to be careful and mindful and follow through than it is to just splatter everywhere and try to hit as many bases as possible. It's more important to think about that long term when you arrive, because everything that you do can build on everything that came before it, as long as you see it as a progression. And so advice that I give to people the most is to slow down and really think about what they want to do next, because they don't have to do everything. It's more important to be mindful of what they want to do and then go and do it. It reminds me a lot of the key difference, I think, between an introvert and an extrovert. An extrovert gets a lot of energy out of talking with other people. They find it very energizing. Whereas an introvert has to spend energy whenever they're with other people. It's not that they dislike being with the person, but net, it's a drain on their internal resources. And so as a person in business, you always have to keep or be mindful most of energy. Even more, it's more important than time, I would say, because if you're drained all the time, if you're exhausted, then you can't do very much of anything. And so being able to tap into what your energy level is and make sure that you never get below a certain balance is really important. And this is why I think it's important for entrepreneurs to sleep a lot more than our culture tells people to. Our culture seems to defend, lots of sleepless nights, and I have to say that in general makes people less productive than more productive. So if there's one thing to be mindful, not just in building networks, but in business, it's keep track of your energy level and make sure that you have resources that you can call on when you need them. Doing a startup is hard, and the more I say it, the more I believe it. It is hard. It's one of the hardest things a person has to do. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth doing. In fact, you're just given this one life, so why not do the hardest thing that you can do, right? That everything that looks like it's going to lead to, suffering could actually be interesting opportunities. And so I think the key is to approach it with the right attitude of, I'm not going to avoid the pain. Instead, I'm going to, barrel through this, and I'm going to make things happen. And, I'm up for the challenges, bring them on. But, also be mindful of the fact that you shouldn't do it alone, that nobody does it alone, that everybody has support structures. You have co-founders, and you have to be willing to share with them. If you're feeling vulnerable, if you're feeling, some kind of emotion, you have to be able to share it with them, so that way you can get it out of your head and really understand why you're feeling that way and work through it. Similarly, every entrepreneur or founder has family and friends, and rather than shut them out of, family and friends can't understand everything that you're going through, but they certainly can be there for emotional support, and they certainly can be there just to listen to you. And what you want to do is you actually want to engage them, because otherwise you do grow apart from them. If you keep them in touch with what you're feeling and why you're feeling it, then they understand more why you're doing what you're doing, and it deepens your relationship with them too. So the key is to not let it be too isolating. Sure, there's nobody who knows what you're going through besides you of all the details, but you can share many of those details and use those to deepen your relationships with people, and that's what's so great about it. Almost everybody who lands in Silicon Valley doesn't have a lot when they land. They don't have a lot of resources, they don't have a lot of money, they don't have a lot of connections. They may have a lot of energy, but we're only humans, so that energy will only take you so far, and we still only have 24 hours in a day. So pay it forward is this concept of, this person who arrives here doesn't have tremendous things, and yet they still need to get things done. And the way they get things done is that people usually are willing to do things for them. And so you can imagine an entire ecosystem where people are willing to do things for other people, even though there isn't much in it for them at all, with the notion that, if that person is successful, then they'll be willing to do it for the next person who arrives. And that philosophy really is baked into our ecosystem in Silicon Valley. I've seen this time and again with people. Sometimes they even surprise me because they're powerful or they're rich, and they're still willing to do these kinds of pay-it-forward actions for people. I would say that paying it forward and being a giver, they tap into the same basic notion that rather than put it right on the table of, I do this for you and then you do this for me, they say, you know what, I do this for you, and hopefully if you get to the point where you're successful, you can do it for somebody else. So yeah, I think they draw from the same essential philosophy. And I think the reason that it is essential is that it creates the next generation of people who are then able to help the next generation of people. That because new entrepreneurs start without very much of anything, if you don't have the people who are in the ecosystem willing to help them at all, the ecosystem itself becomes very inward-looking instead of very outward-looking. And I think that part of what makes Silicon Valley great is that it is constantly bringing new people into the ecosystem. And you need a way to do that in a way that maintains the structure that you have, but is also open and inviting. So this is a good tool for inviting new people into the system. I think it's possible that you can have Silicon Valley type culture without pay it forward, but I'm not sure I would want to live in that ecosystem. That would be much more like a world of Wall Street, where everybody is asking for things in exchange for whatever they do, and keeping tabs on each other. That's a much more cutthroat, dog-eat-dog world. I think what makes Silicon Valley so interesting is that despite the fact that people compete with each other, they are also more than willing to help each other. And I think that they do that because they realize it's good for the whole ecosystem. There's much more of this, the ecosystem is bigger than myself, so I'm going to contribute to it.